There is a phenomenon that I have witnessed and been a part of many times. I'm sitting with a group of people at a meal table, and someone says, "Who would like to say grace?" And suddenly the tines on someone's fork become very, very interesting. Or the view out the window. People look everywhere except at the person who asked the question. This also happens at many meetings or gatherings when someone says, "Are there any volunteers?" Or in a classroom when a teacher says, "If anyone has the answer." Somehow we believe that if we don't actually look at the person who asked the question, we can avoid answering it. We don't have to say yes or no or even "I don't know," because maybe the question wasn't really asked or it wasn't for us. But you see, if you make eye contact, you can no longer ignore the question. I've been wondering how many of us cope with the wilderness of our lives by just not looking at it. How much energy do you put into avoiding dealing with difficult things? Some of us do it much more than others, I know. But I think that even the most direct of us sometimes try to cope with our stress by simply not dealing with it. So maybe you're the kind of person who is sort of worried about a health concern, but you don't go see a health professional or a practitioner about it. No, you just think about it a lot. Or you read everything you can online about it. Or maybe you're a person who puts things off. There's not enough information yet. Or there isn't adequate preparation, I'm not ready. Or there are too many things to do first. Or we're not actually at the deadline, so there's no rush. Or maybe instead of doing something, you're the kind of person who just thinks about it, and thinks about it, and thinks about it, and thinks about it, and thinks about it some more. Maybe you're the person who avoids unpleasant feelings by replacing them with something else. Another feeling, perhaps. "I'm really happy, sure I am." Or getting mad when you're actually in pain or really sad. Or maybe you go shopping or play games on your phone or whatever can distract you from what's happening right around you. Maybe you avoid something because you had a bad experience with something like it once upon a time. Maybe you avoid a situation because you're afraid of spiders or the dark, or you just don't want to be there. I'm sure you will know the things that you like to avoid and how to avoid them. You may not know all of the reasons why you do it. Well, if you're familiar with Sendek's children's book, Where the Wild Things Are, you may remember that after he's sent to his room, Max travels to the place where many wild things are, and when they roar and gnash their teeth, Max said, "Be still." And he tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. I so like this description of the magic trick of staring into the eyes without blinking. It speaks to that way that eye contact doesn't allow us to pretend or ignore the question. Now, certainly, there are cultural differences to acknowledge about looking into people's eyes. In some cultures and other kinds of different situations, looking directly into people's eyes conveys very different meanings. But still, I think for us, the metaphor holds. Whether direct eye contact is perceived as a challenge, or is unsettling, or is respectful, it has the power to influence our behavior. And when we face our fears and look them in the eye, there is a similar potential to influence their power over our behavior. I think that's what Jesus is doing in the wilderness. He is facing fears. Let's think about those temptations he faces. Jesus has gone into the desert to focus his attention. He's hungry, but by choice. He's chosen to pursue a spiritual quest, as hard as he knows it's going to be. And I'm guessing that once he's there, it's even harder than he thought it was going to be. That's often how those spiritual quests are. And so he is hungry, and the first temptation then is to get his version of fast food. A quick and easy way to get rid of some discomfort. But the truth is, the main discomfort he's feeling is not that he's going to die of starvation. That would be an entirely different story. In this story, this discomfort that Jesus is feeling is about the ministry he is about to begin. It's about the new direction his life is about to take. And what do you think he's afraid of? I wonder if he's afraid of not being up to the task. I wonder if he's afraid of what's going to happen when he goes out and meets the people. Will they listen? Will they like him? What are the things you are afraid of when you're about to start a new direction or a new job? These temptations all seem to poke away at an insecurity about this new path he's about to take. So does he have the stamina? Does he have the endurance? Does he have the resources he needs? Well, lots of bread would make him feel like he has the right supplies. He may well be afraid, but he knows if he tries to fill himself up with food that will only feed the body, his soul is still going to starve. And if all he can give to people is bread, that's probably not going to be enough. So bread's not going to solve his problem. And so looking that question in the eye, he quotes the book of Moses and says, "We do not live by bread alone." And the temptation for bread subsides. I wonder if he's afraid of not knowing how the people are going to respond to his message. Are they going to take him seriously? Will they follow where he's trying to lead? In the second temptation of the story, he's offered control. He can be in charge. He can control his destiny. Yes, he'll have to switch his loyalty, but it's the easy way to get people to do what you want them to do. And that's the point, isn't it? Of course, if he switches his loyalty, he'll have nowhere to lead people anymore. A captive people will simply switch dictators. Find no freedom in that. Letting go of control is scary, isn't it? So that's the question Jesus must look in the eye, and he quotes his faith tradition again, saying, "Worship only God." And the temptation for control loosens its hold. But Jesus' confidence is vulnerable still to temptation, and the final temptation in the story is take the easy route to popularity. Perform an amazing feat that proves that he will have instant celebrity status. Because really, you're not any good unless you have some special powers or a blessing. So do a daring feat, force God to rescue you. You'll have all the fans you need. Of course, followers who are always looking for a spectacle are changeable, but they don't really change their hearts and lives. Jesus must look that question in the eye. And he finds an answer in his scripture one more time. Do not put your God to the test. And that fear loses some of its power. Well, for a while. Because the end of the story says that there will be more opportunities for temptation. It's not over and gone. We know that well too, don't we? That's why when we try to change our coping strategies into more healthy patterns, when we try to stop avoiding things, we need to do it one step at a time. gently, one day at a time. It's okay to face our fears gradually. It is also sobering to be thinking about facing our fears in light of this week's terror attacks on 2 mosques in New Zealand. Because I think these kinds of mass shootings invite us to be afraid of what could happen to anyone at any time in any place. As I've been thinking about this recent tragedy, I keep going back to a speech that is 87 years old, given by the US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes our needed efforts. I think there is an unreasoning, unjustified terror at play in our world. It's making people who are different from one another frightening to each other. And whole races of people are becoming the enemy. And frankly, I would like to just look away. I don't want this to be my world. I don't want this to be my reality. I don't want it to be my problem. And yet in my world, white-skinned people who claim to be Christian are calling people of color who are not Christian the enemy. As a white-skinned follower of Jesus, I do not want to look that in the eye. I am right there with Jesus in the wilderness, believing that the path of love is the only way forward, not sure how to share that message with my world, knowing too that the message of love for everyone doesn't always appeal to people who have held power for a long time. We might be tempted to be distracted from this calling by anything that seems easier to deal with. We might be tempted to make our message more flashy or more exciting. We might be tempted to try to control every little bit of everything we can. We might be tempted to use this moment to test God. But in this wilderness moment, I don't think it's the time to blink. Rather, let us try and look one another in the eye, to try to really see one another, so that we may be less afraid of each other. Oh, this wilderness is not an easy place to be. It can be wild, it can be scary, and somehow there are so many things visible to us, big and small, that we would simply rather avoid. But when we close our eyes, they don't go away. We know that. And it is only by opening our eyes that we can look for the truth behind our fear. Only by opening our eyes can we see ways to move through our fear. And only by opening our eyes can we see the glimpses of hope that God offers us right there in the wilderness. May it be so. Amen.